Hi there. I happen to have in my YouTube suggestions a video of a floating stone in Jerusalem, as I'm currently trying to work out when Al-Aqsa and Dome of the Rock were built and by whom. I went to the reference page thinking there might be something interesting there, and the person who writes there seems to say the rock picture is a fake. So this was just another stupid con job to mislead gullible Muslims into believing their Quran, which is the base for the entire religion, is something special. When looking for the page on the floating stone, I came across some other information which I consider to be symptomatic for Muslims and their belief system, which is based on superstitions and gullibility. Let's start with the big pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj. It is one of 5 pillars of Islam. The pillars are the result of the interpretation of an account in the hadiths of different people talking about something which today is known as the Hadith of Gabriel. So we have the Shahada, we have the prayers, we have the fasting, we have the almsgiving and the pilgrimage. This pilgrimage is not always considered kindly by Allah, because in 1990, 1,400 pilgrims were trampled to death or suffocated in a stampede. 2004, 251 pilgrims were killed, and in 2006, 364. I can think of nicer ways to die, and I'm a bit surprised Allah can't. Anyway, in the meantime, some non-Muslims, the Chinese, were commissioned to build a railway to efficiently and conveniently transport the pilgrims between different locations prescribed in the various rituals.
The joint Chinese-Saudi project was built by 14,000 Chinese workers, 16 of whom were arrested and deported after they protested over pay and work conditions.
These rituals range from the appearance regarding hairstyle and clothing all the way to this week's all-important stoning of the devil by throwing pebbles at Jamrat al-Aqaba. How about sending the folks back home a greeting card with Shaun the sheep? Highly original. Oh, and there's a funny incident, because I find that Islamic sites copy from each other without any research of their own or even understanding what they're copying. I often find things such as this, where the order of the words doesn't seem to have bothered anyone. He throws 7 consecutive pebbles at Jamrat al-Aqaba, which is the closest monument to Mecca, saying, "Greatest as he Allah is the throws each pebble." I think it should more likely saying Allah is the greatest as he throws each pebble. It was simply formatted differently in the version they copied, but a non-believer notices this mistake, a Muslim does not. Or I come across a page where I have 1 1/4 lakh Indians arriving in Saudi in 2011, reporting further that 2.5 million Muslims converged on Jeddah, amongst which we have 1,24,948 Indians. This number is repeated, and out of this huge number, only 3 made it to Medina. And sadly, 75 pilgrims expired. Oh dear. Doesn't anyone care what goes out to the public anymore? But what they do have in common is this omnipresent donate button, and like here, an entire banner selling their stuff to make more money. Get real, guys. In summary, someone in the 21st century is required to believe that following and copying what is said what someone did in the 7th century is beneficial in the eyes of a god, like drinking the water that Muhammad had used to wash himself and had spit into. Yuck. Or, as described only a few sentences earlier, using an odd number of stones to clean your private parts in the toilet. I feel like Sly Stallone in Demolition Man, where he is unaware of what to do with the shells. But it seems that if the rituals are based on religious superstitions and ancient fairy tales, some people today will think nothing of it, just following an old book. Amazing. Like throwing yourself on the ground 5 times a day in a specific direction and going through some rituals. Well, this is expected to appease some god and provide some reward at a later date. Just following an old book. Amazing. Or like assembling at a specific place on earth and performing yet more rituals. Just following an old book. Amazing. Now, not everybody is allowed to go. There are some basic conditions before people can go on Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. The person is a Muslim, has reached the age of discernment, is of full mental capacity, has sufficient funds, and is not a slave. I will bite my tongue not to even comment on the last one, or any of them for that matter. Because women are considered to be equal in Islam, there are some special rules and regulations for them. In the 21 paragraphs or verses I found on the Hajj, in the Quran, I could not see anywhere that women are in any way discouraged from going on Hajj. On the contrary, 22:27 clearly states, and proclaim unto mankind the pilgrimage. Nothing about men or women here. The rituals for both genders are prescribed down to the last detail, such as a woman clips her hair the length of a fingertip, and even the order in which these actions need be performed. There is an entire booklet for women who are instructed what they are allowed to do or not, because men are not as predisposed by nature. So what does a woman have to consider to not have all her efforts invalidated by a minor slip-up? Let's start with traveling. The whole story starts with the question whether a woman is allowed to go on Hajj in the first place. Now, we need to read page after page of Islam scholars and providing their 2 cents on the entire range of possibilities. If a woman travels with a husband and his other wives and some slaves, this situation is perfect and requires no restrictions. But what about a woman traveling with her fiancé? Or what about a woman traveling with her female friend? What about a woman traveling with her aunt, her sister, her brother, her cousin, her brother-in-law alone? Well, all these different cases, and each needs to be carefully examined. You get different opinions from different madhabs, i.e. regions, and scholars within these. Because the Quran is not clear about something, humans need to step in. In other words, it's one big mess. We also see quite clearly why the application of ancient rules makes absolutely no sense, as here it is spelled out that a 3-day travel will cover only 48 miles. So what about showering? Well, Abu Dawood and others narrated that Ibn Abbas and Dar-al-Adam, that Rasulullah, in other words Muhammad, they asked, how did he wash his head? Well, they said he rubbed his head with his hand going back and forth. So, in other words, Muhammad washed his head by rubbing his head with his hand going back and forth. This narration is used by the scholars as proof that it is permissible for a male or female in ihram to take a bath and pour water over her head and to pass her hand through their hair. There is no mention here of drinking this holy water. And by the way, ihram is a set of rituals and prescriptions to get into a clean and holy state. And as always, they vary from madhab to madhab and fiqh to fiqh. The list can become quite extensive and difficult to follow. Then the next one is also in connection with combing one's hair during this ihram. It is makruh or highly discouraged for a woman or even a man to aggressively comb their hair, causing excessive amounts of hair to fall out. Because, and now get this, it's one of the forbidden acts when someone is in ihram, because brushing lightly or scratching one's head, it is permissible, because like this you do not break off any hairs, which Allah would not like at all. So there's a famous saying in the books of fiqh where they suggest that someone should scratch with the insides of the hands, i.e. softly. What about the color of clothes a woman in ihram may wear? Well, again, it is permissible for the woman to wear any women's clothes she pleases which are not attractive or resemble the clothes of men. In other words, she has to cover herself up and it needs to be dark. Then you get all sorts of rules and regulations about kissing the stone because, well, do Muslims worship? They worship only Allah, but they want to kiss the stone. And now we have a problem that the woman who is kissing a stone, it could be that she is standing next to a man who might touch her, and that is not permissible. So you need rules and regulations on this. Now, during the period of a woman, women do have a period, and this is another hot potato requiring many, many pages of opinions and balancing hadiths and jurisprudence, all because the woman is supposedly unclean during her period according to ancient beliefs. superstition at its best. Then you get wearing jewelry, covering the face, because actually a woman should not. A woman in Hajj should not cover her face or wear gloves, just as a male should not cover his head. It actually says there's no difference of opinion on this issue based on the clear statement of Rasul Allah, Muhammad, because he says they should not cover the face, nor should she wear gloves. But having said that, it is permissible for her to cover her face if she fears the gaze of non-mahram men upon her. In other words, not people that are not able to marry her. So as you can see, it can vary. Touching one's spouse intimately or non-intimately. This takes the cake.